Welcome to our small business webinar series. I'm Desiree Brown. I'm Senior Manager of Communications here at the Tory Burch Foundation. I am thrilled to introduce Michelle Bali. She's a creative strategist who helps e-commerce brands take their businesses to new heights. She teaches new entrepreneurs how to take products from zero sales to flying off the shelves, and she's host of Shopify's YouTube channel. So today, Michelle is going to teach us how it's made. So everything that follows once you have your great idea for a new product, all about turning that idea into something that your customers can hold in their hands. So after that, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So be sure to ask your questions directly for Michelle in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can within the hour. As a reminder, today's session will be recorded, so watch your inboxes for the replay link, as well as a special offer from Michelle. All right, so we are ready. Michelle, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to get my screen shared. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to Tory Burch Foundation, Desiree, Ali, the entire team for having me, and thank you to our participants for joining us today. This is a really incredible initiative. I'm so excited to be a part of it. But today we're going to talk about how it's made. So a few years ago, I built a makeup brand. And I made the product formulas from scratch with the help of chemists. And I even had artisans hand make the packaging from scratch with post-consumer plastics. But as soon as I sold out of all my inventory, I actually closed the brand because the supply chain was such a huge headache. And I literally could not even imagine going through another round of production. So today, I'm going to share with you my supply chain mistakes and how you can avoid those mistakes. So we're all going to learn from my failures today. So the first step is the idea phase. So Down Boy Studio was the name of my brand. And my idea was that I would bring natural products to market. So if you were to look on the back of the label, you'd be able to read and pronounce every single ingredient that was in this product. And the second component of this was I wanted the makeup product to be housed in plastics that were post-consumer, 100% post-consumer plastic. So like the mascara tube, I wanted to be post-consumer. Everything about the product itself, I wanted it to be recycled plastics. That was the vision behind the brand. So here I have a little video of me getting some ideas together. And this was, me in full research phase where I was looking at the products that I had, making notes from my chemists. And that's usually kind of what it looks like at the beginning, right? You're getting ideas, you're jotting it down, you're in that kind of research phase. Then we get even further into the research phase. So at this stage, I think I had like $5,000 to put towards a business. And I had not a clue how I would even begin to make makeup packaging out of recycled plastics. I was really making it up as I went along. So my first step, and likely what a lot of you are doing right now as well, is researching on Alibaba or AliExpress to see if the product that you want already exists. And I did find some options, but something I was running into was that the suppliers and the manufacturers were asking for really high MOQs. And remember, I only had like $5,000 that I wanted to spend. So if I ordered 2,000 containers, I'd be blowing a big portion of my budget. Plus, I wasn't confident that I could sell 2,000 units. And my whole ethos of my brand was to reduce waste. So this would, over ordering would really be going against my own ethics and my brand ethics. So I needed to find another way. So I got really crafty. I started looking for out-of-the-box thinking ways to essentially hack my supply chain. I spent hours of research online, and I finally came across this incredible community. It's called Precious Plastics. If you guys are interested in this, as I speak about it, I would 100% recommend you look into it, because what they are is they're they're an organization of groups of people from all over the world, and they collect old plastics and give them a second life. So they could take, old water bottles from the recycling bin, or an old toy that their kid no longer uses. And what they do is they hand build machines like shredders to cut the plastics up and ovens to melt these plastics into new products. So if you guys see over here on the left, these are all handmade machines. And these are people just kind of, doing it out of their backyard. They're regular people that have a passion for environmentalism, and they will go on the Precious Plastics online community and look up literally how to make these machines, and they build them in their backyard. So if you're interested, this is a map of all the different communities around the world that are in this organization. And of those communities, I found these two incredible female artisans. I reached out to them on Instagram, and they were interested in the job. And it was really a mutually beneficial relationship, because they weren't asking for minimum order quantities. I was giving them business. I was, supporting these artisans. So it was a good symbiotic relationship. So as the relationship went on, in the beginning phases, you want to ask about their facilities. You want to ask about their processes. And they showed me their workspace. Over here on the left, this is where they 3D printed their products. This was the workspace that was out of the university. And then they showed me how they cleaned the plastic. So this was before the dirty plastic and after how they cleaned it. So we really went into depth with what their facilities were like and what their processes were like. So once we decided that we wanted to work together, I went to a 3D printer who made the design of my packaging on the computer. And if you guys are coming to, if you're starting your business and you are developing a product from scratch, I would highly recommend that you leverage a 3D printer. If you have one, I happen to have one locally, and I literally just walk down the street. But if you don't, then I would recommend you go online. There are 3D printers all over the world that you can use this service. But the reason why you want to do this is because you can see your product in your hands before paying for the mold and before going into full production. So that's what I did. I went to a 3D printer. He did the design of my packaging on the computer. And then once I was happy with it, once I had it in my hand, I felt the weight, I felt the size, the dimensions, everything was good. And I approved it. He printed me a sample. And I took that home, played with it a little bit. And then I was happy with it. And I was more confident that I can go into full production. And so on the left here, this was like the beginning stages of the design. This was how it looked on the computer. This was that 3D file. And then over here, this was the 3D printed product. So like that lid was 3D printed, and this entire casing was 3D printed. So I was really confident. I was happy with it. And that's how I knew that I wanted to go full force into it. So then what I did was I brought that 3D file to the artisans so that they could make molds. So the molds are where the plastic was injected into so that it can take on the shape that I wanted with my logo. So this was like the lids, and this was the casing. So pretty early on, we were having some quality issues. The plastic was getting burnt. If you guys can see in that middle photo, it's kind of it looks like it's dirt, but it's actually just burnt. On the right-hand side, you could see maybe some bubbles, some roughness, some texture. So pretty early on, we were running into some quality issues. And it was coming out uneven. It just was like, if I were a customer, I wouldn't be happy to get this product. So, that took up a lot of energy. And finally, once we got, the bulk of our makeup packaging, that was like reasonable and usable, finally the delivery came in. Then, so I was like, okay, cool. Packaging done. Now I have to figure out the actual product that goes inside the packaging. What is the makeup going to look and feel like? So what I did was I ordered a bunch of ingredients online because I was like, oh, I can do this myself. I can make the makeup myself. But immediately, it was immediately no. I knew that I needed to rely on the expertise of someone who knows what they were doing. So I went onto LinkedIn to see if I could find a cosmetic chemist that would be open to doing freelance work. But what happened was I found that a lot of these professionals were already, working for big companies, and they weren't willing to work on a side project that might compromise their relationship at their daytime job, which was totally understandable. So if you're kind of running into that issue, I'd recommend that you leverage Facebook groups. They are such a great tool to find professionals that are looking for freelance work. And here I found a cosmetic chemist. And she had access to a workspace. She had tools, she had ingredients, and she was interested in working together. Her name was Sherry. So if any of you are in the beauty or makeup space, I would be more than happy to share her information. I would highly recommend her. But yeah, so I worked with Sherry. She came up with my formulas, and I had a product. So essentially I had the packaging, I had the product itself, and we came to market with a face gloss, a lip gloss, blushes, and a brow gel. So I had 4 products. So now with my packaging and the makeup all ready to go, all ready to be sold, the next part was marketing that I existed as a brand, marketing these incredible new products that I had developed. And what ended up happening was I was able to tell my brand story, and it really hit home with an audience on TikTok and went viral and had millions of views and sold out immediately. So this was one of the videos that went viral. Let's see if I can.
At first, it seemed impossible.
I'm not going to play through the entire thing, but basically it's just me talking about the process, how the brand came to life, why making products out of recycled packaging is important. And so this is one of the videos that did really well. So then it came time to make another batch. And, after selling out, I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to do this all over again. And the thought of it alone just made me so miserable and so anxious and so stressed, because at every phase in my supply chain, I had a major issue. From the sourcing, it was too costly. The small batches were making it so that the profit margins were too low. From the making, there was, the quality of the packaging was not up to standard, and the communication was sometimes poor with the manufacturers the artisans because just the language barrier and the delivery, there was too long of lead time. So essentially everything was so kind of pieced together that it required my full attention at every step, and nothing was on autopilot. So I made the decision. I was like, you know what? This is not bringing me joy. It's time to move on. I closed the business, and that was that. So what would I do different? Now knowing what I know, what would I do? I think for starters, I would budget more money. I think every business has its own costs, but for what I wanted to do, starting with $5,000 just wasn't enough. And supply chains are really the backbone of many businesses. So I would say it is a worthwhile investment to budget, to just, have some budget for your supply chain. I think I should have been a little less conservative, just put more money forward for that. I am a little bit risk averse. That's just my personality. So I do understand, why I wanted to start with less, but I think looking back, investing more upfront may have changed the course of my business. Secondly, I would have focused on ethics. I focused so heavily on ethics, which is important, and it's an important part of running a business, but I definitely neglected other very crucial parts of what makes a supply chain successful. I think if I could do it all over again, I would, focus on making the packaging from post-consumer materials, because that was really important to me. But I would also focus on working with the right manufacturers, the quality, timelines, costs. And obviously, it's funny saying that now out loud because, it sounds kind of obvious, like that's something that I should have thought of, but made for a good presentation. So I guess that's all that matters. So now knowing what I know, and also having worked at e-commerce companies where I could see how things work behind the scenes, this is probably the course that I would have taken. This is probably what I would have done. So let's see here. Number one, you're going to want to identify your product or service. So a lot of you might have some ideas of what you want to do, but if you're in the, finding your idea stage, then I would really recommend that you build your business off of a passion, something that you are truly, truly interested in. Because I think 9 times out of 10, if you're going to go for something random, that's going to be a major cause of burnout and maybe just not being as interested 2 years down the road. But being passionate about what you're doing every day is really going to act as a safeguard and a safety net against you burning out. And it's going to ensure that you're staying motivated and interested in what you're doing. But let's say, you're at the idea phase and you're not passionate about anything at the moment. And in fact, you're actually just passionate about growing a business and making money and seeing that growth. Then I think at this phase, you're going to want to be focused on business ideas with high profit margins, business ideas that have high demand, and business ideas that have potential for growth. So next up is determining the logistics and transportation requirements. So, hold on, did I skip a thing? That's okay, no worries. We'll move on to that. So when you're looking at the logistics and transportation requirements, I think what sometimes is overlooked is how big of a cost shipping is. So don't forget to factor that into your plans really early on. And also make sure that your shipping times are kind of sorted out at the beginning, because that's going to affect how many repeat customers you have. So making sure that your lead times are short is going to give you, is going to be the key to a long-term sustainable business. So sorting those details out at the beginning is going to be super valuable. And the next step is you want to establish your inventory processes and policies. So, you can DIY it for sure. I would actually recommend you DIY it at the beginning, like, doing it from your living room, starting a Shopify store and shipping it yourself, totally reasonable. A lot of people start out that way. But if you're ready to work with a warehouse, that's also an option too. DIYing it at the beginning ensures that you are saving costs as you're testing your business idea out, and you can be a little bit more lean. So, yeah, don't be afraid to do that and do it yourself. The next step is you want to implement technology. So either you are running a Shopify store and you're using apps or some other technology, but a great example of this is leveraging ShipStation. So if you're not familiar, ShipStation is an app that you can plug right into Shopify that'll help streamline your shipping processes. And then the next step is monitoring your performance. So you might build some really strong relationships at first, but then it's very possible that you find that over time that your manufacturers are maybe underperforming. Like maybe, for example, they're always late. That's definitely probable. And that's actually happened to someone I know, because their manufacturers that they were working with onboarded a client that was much bigger than them, and then they kind of fell by the wayside. So they decided to make a change. They decided to switch it up. They decided to go with a different manufacturer. Another valid reason to make a change is maybe your manufacturer's costs are just getting too high. So even if you already have your systems and processes in place with your suppliers and your manufacturers, don't be afraid to, switch it up, make a change, especially if your business is being negatively affected. A company that I've worked with before actually has gone through 12 different manufacturers before settling down on the one that they have now. So that's all a normal part of getting your processes in place and starting a business. And lastly, kind of just what I said, always be open to improvement. Technology is always changing. Processes are always, flexible and changing. So don't be afraid to make changes. Alrighty. So I feel like these are some common questions when starting a business that I kind of just wanted to touch upon. And oh, how strange. Kind of cut off a little bit, but that's okay. I think one of the biggest questions that I've, received is, where can I find a supplier? Where can I find a manufacturer? So online marketplaces are amazing. Something like CJ Dropshipping, AliExpress, Alibaba. Those are really quick and easy ways to vet manufacturers. And the line of communication is right there on the website. So that's great. You can also go to trade shows. Obviously, this wasn't available during COVID, but now that things are opening up, I would say absolutely take advantage of this. Word of mouth, there's nothing like a good word of mouth recommendation for someone that has already used a manufacturer. So don't be afraid to ask your network, ask your friends, go on LinkedIn, put some feelers out, Google search, ChatGPT. Would I say ChatGPT? You could try ChatGPT. I haven't tried it myself, but a really good resource is Justin P on Instagram. If you guys haven't heard of him, basically he is a drop shipper. He's like an influencer on Instagram that gives really good tips on where to find suppliers and drop shippers. He has like uncovered like the manufacturers behind Skims and Supreme and Louis Vuitton. So he has lots of good tips. So check him out. I think his handle is just like @JustinP. And he's a great resource just to keep up with. Another question that I hear often is, how do I ensure that the product that I develop will sell? I think it's, obviously really scary to go into business. You're putting in your time, you're putting in your money and your effort and your emotion, and you want to make sure that what you do is going to hit. Obviously, there's no kind of like guarantee, but there are things that you can do in order to up the chances that your products will do well. So there is a tool called Exploding Topics, and that will kind of give you insight into what products might pop off in the future. This is going to show you trends of things that are kind of exploding now. Google Trends is a really great one as well. That's going to help you with predictions. Maybe you want to hop onto like a trendy product that's kind of exploding, or you want to look at evergreen products that are going to be good year round. Google Trends is going to be a really great resource to find that information. Real world interactions. I feel like this is kind of underrated. So right as you are coming up with your idea for your product, it's really important to kind of look around you and think about what's not working. What does a customer need and how can I fix that problem? So, keep your eyes open in your day-to-day interactions, because that is going to help you identify a problem so that you can fix that problem. And lastly, I should have done this probably, I was lucky that it worked out, but I probably should have done this in my business, is test it on social media before you even produce anything. So go to TikTok, maybe you have like a 3D rendering and you show that on a video and you talk through your idea. The reason why we want to test on social media first is because it is a pretty good indicator of how your audience will respond. It's a pretty good indicator of how, what content will also hit with ads as well, but that's, for a whole other thing. But if you have a video that does really well on TikTok, that's, a pretty good proof, and consistently, not just one video, that is pretty good proof that people are interested in what you have to say and what you have to sell. So I would recommend doing that first. Another question that I hear is, how do I protect myself? So, you're talking to manufacturers, you're talking to suppliers, you don't know these people yet. And there are things that you can do to make sure that you're protecting your time, your energy, and your money. So I would say, first things first, always ask for samples before, investing a ton of money into a full line of products. Make sure that you're asking for samples, and suppliers and manufacturers will be more than happy to give that to you. A way to kind of like protect yourself, just yourself and your business, is building friendly relationships. Like that is always going to be the number one thing, is like, if you really believe in your partners and they believe in you, they're going to do anything to help you and you're going to do anything to help them. So that's, you want to do that for yourself and your enjoyment and as a business owner, but it's also a great way to make sure that the people that you're working with are going to be on your side and you're going to be on their side. Another way to protect yourself is to put deposits down first and then pay in full later whenever possible. So if you're going into production, you can pay half. And then once the whole batch is received and you've checked the quality and you're happy with everything, then you will pay the full amount. So, you can do that not just with the products that you produce, but, like let's say you want to hire a freelance designer, pay them half up front, of course. But you want to make sure that once the work is received and it's good, then you're paying them the full thing. So that's a really great way to protect yourself and keep your partners motivated to do really good work for you. And then, I think some people have in their head about the goals that they want to reach with their supply chain. Maybe that's environmental sustainability. So you can focus on using local distribution centers and reducing the packaging waste. So not putting unnecessary kind of like flyers in there, or not using styrofoam, or not using bubble wrap, that kind of a thing. And definitely look to minimize inventory as well. I mean, there's always a dance with inventory. You kind of want to order as much as you can in order to anticipate the needs of your customers, but you also don't want to over order, because then you'll be sitting on inventory. So that's like a whole other discussion, but the rule of thumb is minimizing inventory is key not only to your bottom line, but to the environment as well. And then there's another one that got cut off, but what it said is how to make your supply chain more resilient. So I think in order to kind of safeguard you from relying on one supplier, and if they go out of business, or if they raise their costs, if they raise their pricing, then you're kind of like at the mercy. I would say if you want to make sure that you are not putting all your eggs in one basket, try working with many suppliers and many manufacturers, so that you are not putting yourself in a hard position. And that pretty much concludes. So in terms of kind of next steps for all of you, if you want some of these resources, I'm happy to share those with you. But I also am offering a discovery session. So if you have like any burning questions, like maybe you're at the beginning stage and you don't know what to make, you don't know what your audience is going to be, you want help in the planning stage, I am always available for that. Or if you're kind of already selling and you're maybe like can't figure out why you're not making any sales, or how do I make my e-commerce site better, I'm also available for that as well. So always available for that. And the discovery session is free. And if you wanted to get in touch, you can text me or you can email me, and that would be the best way to reach out.
Great. So Michelle, thank you so much. Before we get into the meat of our Q&A, we had a lot of questions about the recycled plastic person that you work with, Sherry, I believe her name was. What is the best way for people to find out more information?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to share a WhatsApp. So if you guys are looking to get into, maybe you want to build like literally a whole product from recycled packaging, they can do that. Or if you just want it to be like part of your offering, then they can do that. Yeah, I mean, I could share their WhatsApp. I think that would probably be the best way to go about it. I'm sure they'd love that to have that extra business.
Okay, great. And so for people who are on today, that is information that we can include in our post-webinar email, so that you can all have that. And on the topic of working with plastics, we did have a question about getting the file needed to bring to the 3D printer. What is a good way for someone to go about that if they have no knowledge? Is that more of the looking in Facebook groups, or is there another way to go about that?
Yeah, good question. So like I have no experience in that either. What I did was my 3D printer made the file himself, and he just added that as a service, like just build me for that. So likely your 3D printer can do that for you, or if they can't, I would agree, like Facebook groups are a great place to find talent. You can go on Upwork as well, or Fiverr.
Okay, yes, two great resources. And just repeating that for everyone, Upwork and Fiverr, 2 R's at the end. So when you go and look for that. Okay. Your presentation also touched on drop shipping. Can you just give a general overview for us what that is and how entrepreneurs can work with drop shippers?
Yeah, 100%. So drop shipping is a low cost, low risk model of selling products. So essentially the way that it works is you would open up, let's say, a Shopify store, and you would add a app called like an AliExpress app or a CJ dropshipping app that's free to add. And from that catalog, you would choose what you want to include on your website. So let's say you want to sell jewelry. I know I saw a lot of people saying that they're in the jewelry space. You could go on CJ Dropshipping, go on AliExpress. You can type in, let's say it's like butterfly earrings, I don't know, and you find what you like. Then you would, it's literally a click of a button to add it to your store. You would have control over what the product description looks like, what the photos look like. And then that's now available on your site. So what happens is, let's say someone comes onto your website and they go, oh, I want those butterfly earrings. Then they would check out and your supplier gets a notification that an order has come in. And it's your supplier's or manufacturer's job to make that product and ship it to the customer. So you do not have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars in inventory because you're not paying for anything up front. It just goes directly to the consumer. So that's so there's obviously pros and cons because, you know, what you can sell, anyone can sell. So there's a lot of competition, but the pros are if you're trying to test an industry or if you're trying to test brand messaging, it's a great way to get started. And even it's a great way to start building relationships with manufacturers so that later you go, hey, I want to make a custom product. You have that rapport built. So yeah, it's a great entry point. And yeah, AliExpress and CJ Dropshipping would be a great place to start.
Okay. And so that's great. And I know you said that those are Shopify plugins, or they have Shopify plugins available rather. So on the topic of Shopify, what advice do you have for people who are getting started, especially people who are launching a store and need to figure out, you know, or to approach the MOQ, which stands for minimum of quantity?
Oh, yes. In terms, yeah, I mean, when you're starting a Shopify store, I would just say, I really like the themes and the templates are there. Like stick to them because they're, you know, built by designers that have optimized them for conversions. I would say as much as you can, stick to them and then add your own flair, like add your own copy, add your own images if you can, avoid stock, try using your original images. And one actually quick tip, if you can't afford to do, you know, a whole photo shoot, for example, or maybe you don't have time or you don't have the space or you don't have the equipment, a really, really good tool to getting photos that are original, not stock, is Dolly. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Dolly. Basically, you go and you type in a text prompt and you could be like, image of diamond ring on a velvet couch. I don't know, maybe that's your lifestyle image that you want to use.
Okay.
It will spit it out. And it's like taking millions of data points from the internet to generate a whole new image that never existed before. So you don't have to spend tons of money on a photographer. Or it's, yeah, exactly. So I think Xander said it's AI. It's AI. Oh, thank you for dropping it. That's perfect. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great tool. And then in terms of, there was a second part to that. I think you're asking about.
Yes. So trying to figure out how much product to even start with, figuring out the initial quantity, or figuring out or trying to predict what the demand might be.
That's a great question. It's crazy because I really had to make an educated guess. I think there are formulas and there's ways to predict, but for me, I was like, you know, started with hundreds, not thousands. I think if you can start as low as possible without really affecting the cost, that's probably ideal. And you can kind of gauge if you are testing on TikTok and social media, engaging interest, you can kind of gauge, you know, like 2% of that engagement might be willing to purchase from me, 1%, and, you know, like really play it safe. So let's say, you know, you have, I don't know, 100 people liking, maybe like a couple will buy of that piece of content, if that makes sense. So that's one place to start. I wish I had more information in terms of like actual formulas, because there's, you know, math and science behind this, but that's definitely something I can come back with.
Sure. Okay. And so for you, when you were figuring out pricing, how did you go about that? It's tough because people want to be competitive, but you also are, you know, shelling out a lot to make a product.
For sure. I had a spreadsheet with what I knew my costs were going to be and kind of worked up from there. So it was like shipping, I needed to pay people, I needed to pay for the Shopify store. Like I had all my costs. And then I was like, okay, well, I want to make 20% on top of that. So that would give me my number. And if I looked at my competitors, it kind of laid in that space. So figuring out your costs, knowing what you want your markup to be in terms of a percentage, figuring out, seeing that number, and then going back and seeing if that's competitive. If it's too high, then maybe you can look at where can I reduce my costs in certain areas. Maybe that's shipping. Maybe I'm paying for shipping. Maybe you as a business owner are offering free shipping, but you're eating that cost. So you're kind of looking to see where you can move some pieces around.
Sure. And so I know that you said a little bit about, word of mouth as far as evaluating manufacturers, but do you have other advice for someone who wants to make sure that their manufacturer is good, and also that they have ethical practices?
Yeah, good question. So on Alibaba, you can see how many years a manufacturer has been in business for. There's like a little badge. Okay. And you could see their ratings as well. A good rule of thumb is never to go below 4.5 in terms of ratings, because that just shows that, that manufacturer is, on time, good with communication, has good products. So I would kind of start there. And then in terms of ethical practices, what I did is you can ask for videos and photos of the facilities. You can ask to hop on a call. That's a great way to just like gauge how honest they are, how much you trust them, whether their conditions are like fair and clean and the working space is reasonable. So that's a really good place to start. I think if like any manufacturer is refusing or kind of dodging that would be a bit of a red flag for me, and I might kind of steer clear. But for the most part, people are definitely willing to hop on a call and a video chat. So that's probably a good way to start.
That is great advice. Thank you. And so were there any legal considerations that you had when you got started? For example, did you form an LLC, or what kinds of contracts did you try to have on hand for suppliers?
I did not. I actually, in hindsight, I should have probably structured my business. I was like, let's go, but I think, I think if you're really kind of like at the phase where you've tested your idea, you definitely want to do that, then like structure it, as an LLC or a corporation or whatever. But I think, in terms of writing contracts, before getting into any, relationship, I always did have a contract. So, writing, like, there's kind of like two schools of thought. There's one where it's like very legal, very protecting yourself. You could go that way for sure, but there's another route where it's like, okay, this is going to be more casual. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm going to business with you because I more or less have the kind of feeling that we're going to do well. I trust you so far. So having kind of like a more casual contract, I personally think is a nicer way to start, where, you have the expectations of who is responsible for what. And that way, you're not scaring anyone off. If you do want to get into the more legal side, you can, find services online that are a little bit more structured. So that's a great place to start. But ChatGPT, you can start there as well, just as a starting base if you want to do something a little more casual.
And I don't know if at any point during the process of trying to figure this out, if you did try to keep manufacturing in the US, but even so, is that something that you can speak to? I know that question has come up a couple times.
Yes. My chemist was in the US, but the women that were helping me with the packaging were in Indonesia. So kind of keeping the actual product that's going to touch and go on your face was in the US. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And certainly I know that, for an example, like sites like Fiverr and Upwork do let you know where contractors are located. So that's something that can probably help for people who are concerned about kind of keeping business in the US, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And did you have to travel to manufacturers that were abroad?
I think it's a great way to build relationships and see that everything is up to your standards. It's probably, but it's not super necessary just with technology. Like we can see with video chat. So if you maybe don't have all the money to shell out on a plane ticket and hotels and all that kind of a thing, then video chat's a good kind of starting off point.
Sorry. That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then let's see, I'm just taking a look at the Q&A box to see what has come in. I know that some of the entrepreneurs on today have some concerns about kind of protecting their big idea. And so do you have any advice for that? You mentioned testing an idea on TikTok, but how do you make sure that, there aren't 1,000 copycats before you can get to market?
Honestly, that's a great question. I think that's kind of like the risk of running a business. I think, yeah, I mean, you see dupes all over the place. The next brand is coming in with a very similar product for less expensive. And that's kind of, I mean, you could get a patent, but I think it's probably a form of flattery. And it kind of shows you that you're creating a product that is needed. One thing that I will say that happened to me in terms of like, now that we're talking about contracts and that kind of a thing, what happened was I started with one chemist who made me the formulas for my makeup. And when it was time to go into production, I wanted to do it locally. Like she was in the US and I wanted to do it in Canada because I was in Canada at the time. And she wasn't able to give me the formula, like give me the recipe of the formula because I don't know, she just wasn't willing. So I think what I would have done in hindsight and what I would recommend is like, make sure you know who owns what, because at that time, in our contract, I wasn't protected against that. So I kind of had to start from scratch. So if you're producing a product, make sure you know that, make sure you're stating like who that intellectual property belongs to.
Right. And so once you've gotten the product made, you have it in your hand or in your hands, or maybe like stacked up in your garage, ready to go out. Can you talk to us a little bit about the product launch process? How can someone enter the market? And can you tell us a little bit about your TikTok video and then what you might recommend for people who maybe aren't on TikTok? I know there's several parts to that question. So
yes.
First, how do you enter the market?
Yes. I think having a plan in place in terms of marketing. So whether that is starting with Facebook ads, organic okay, actually, I will say like chronologically. So I would start with organic content, posting to TikTok, posting to Instagram, then seeing what content is doing well. You would push those high performing pieces to ads, because that takes away some of the A/B testing and the money and the guesswork that goes into developing ads. So that's kind of step two. So number one is organic. Number two is paid, And then three, I would really, really focus on building your email list. I think it's an asset that kind of goes overlooked. I think we're all like really, really focused on social media, but run a giveaway, like collaborate with other brands who are also kind of in the same boat as you, and give away some products to be able to exchange for emails. And email lists are like, can be the number one driver of revenue, especially for new businesses. So don't overlook the emails. And then another thing that is really great for, when you're just starting out is making connections with wholesalers. Not making wholesale connections with retailers. So like if you want to sell your product for half to these retailers, then they would mark it up, and then they would sell your product to their audience on your behalf. So that's a really great way to get in front of a new audience that you wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And you can do that as well on, like, not just physical brick and mortar, but you can do that as well on online. So if you want to connect with like e-commerce, what are they called? E-stockists. If you want to connect with e-stockists, that's a great low risk way of getting in front of a different audience as well.
E-stockists. Okay.
E-stockists, yeah.
And I love what you said about email lists. I mean, I think that we have had several experts on here who have said, don't overlook email. It's very easy to get very excited about social media, but email, you're going directly to someone's inbox, not competing with the entire feed. And so that's super important. So thank you for that. See, and so we would love to get a sense of, how did you come to the decision to not make another round of products? And what are kind of green flags that entrepreneurs should look for when they're deciding to restock?
Yes, good question. I think like it was interesting because as much as like I was able to sell my products and everything went well, I think just like listening to my intuition and just feeling that kind of spark died a little bit because of just, I didn't put my processes in place as well as I should have. So I kind of lost a bit of that excitement. I lost a bit of that passion. I didn't find myself super gravitated towards it every day. So that's kind of how I knew. I was like, okay, this has been a really incredible chapter. I've learned a lot, but it's time for me to move on. So I think in terms of like green flags, if you're still motivated, if you're still loving it, if you're seeing that people are responding well and it's making the world a better place and people are enjoying your product, all those things where it's like fueling yourself and it's fueling the community that you've built, those are total green flags to continue and keep going. I mean, like we talk about a lot about the financials and we talk about a lot about, growth and all that, but inside, like from an emotional perspective, if you're not feeling it, don't, we got one life, don't push yourself. You can move on to something else.
Yeah, I definitely think that we hear a lot of people get to a point where it is tricky to know when to end things, and no one wants to hear that, but it's always helpful to hear someone say that, hey, this isn't working and I'm going in a different direction.
Right.
So Lisa had a question here in the chat about e-stockists. I'm making sure that I'm understanding it's stockist, STOCKIST, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who want to get those products into e-stockists?
Yes, 100%. So there's this website called Faire. It's spelled FAIRE. And you can list your products there. And how do I explain what it is? Basically, it's like a marketplace. It's like a wholesale marketplace. So sometimes it acts as retailers reaching out to you to be able to carry your products. Or if you're a retailer and you're looking to stock your online store or your physical store, that's a great place to find products as well. Yeah, Faire, exactly. FAIRE.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ali, for jumping on that. And, once you build that into, I guess, your supply chain, which I am, this e-stockist to become part of the supply chain, how do you then make yourself stand out in a marketplace like that?
That's a great question. Yeah, like if you're listed on Faire, like how do you make yourself stand out? I mean, great product photos, great SEO optimized product descriptions. I would start there. Yeah.
Always helpful. We always talk about helping people find you. So that's the keywords that you might use or that someone might use when they're searching. Super helpful to think about and making sure that they get a clear understanding of what the product actually does. Right. I imagine it's always helpful to include. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's see. And what?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if I didn't explain that properly, but building off of what you said there, like when someone is going to type anything into, let's say, Fair or even Google, they're going to be using keywords to try to get to where they're going. So let's say, for example, they have like a brick and mortar store and they want to sell rugs. They might type in like Moroccan rug, and that's like a really popular keyword. So you might want to include that in your product title or your product descriptions so that people can find you easier.
Great. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to go back to something that you said in your presentation. When you said that if you were to do this again, you would consider things outside of the ethics of the manufacturing. And so can you talk a little bit about balancing ethics with the more kind of nitty-gritty details of like timelines, product like delivery timelines and things like that?
Yeah, I think like it's important to know what your own boundaries are as a business owner. So for example, like for me, I was trying to be ethical in every single area. I was like, okay, like the ingredients and the packaging and the delivery, because I don't want to waste too much gas in the delivery. Like it was nuts. I would have preferred to just really focus on one area of ethics.
Sure.
And then balance, okay, like that's good. I have that base covered. Now I can look at what are the costs? What are the lead times? What are the shipping? All that. And I think once you have like a good kind of base and structure, then as you grow as a business, then you can maybe afford a little more to start putting more energy, money, and time into expanding your ethical practices.
Right. As with any aspect of business, it's hard to do everything at once. And so we see this a lot with our own entrepreneurs, like just pick one area of focus and expand from there, whether you're talking about your marketing strategy or building out the ethic or building ethics into your supply chain. So super, super helpful. Thank you. Let's see.
Yeah, to your point, especially as a solopreneur, like if you're the only one driving the ship, like exactly what you're saying, like if you want to build a full, robust marketing plan, maybe just like start with TikTok, or maybe just start with a podcast, or maybe just start whatever, like just focus on like one thing at a time. So I totally agree with what you're saying for sure.
And so the makeup line, it sounds like this was more or less a one-person operation outside of the chemist that you work with, and then your lovely your recycled plastic people. But just wanted to get a sense of, were there other people that you relied on during this process, and if not, are there other people that you would have brought in?
Yes. So I had a woman, the timing actually worked out because I had a woman find me on Instagram and ask, she was kind of like getting settled in the Toronto scene and wanted to expand her network and her experience. So she wanted to help me. And she was interning with me for a little bit. And it was fun because I had a friend, we were learning together. I was providing value to her. She was providing value to me. It was really nice. So that kind of just panned out coincidentally. But if you're looking for interns, like going through schools is always a great way. Going through universities is always a great way to see if there are talent that's, willing to work with you.
That is wonderful. And then we had a question from Maureen about hidden costs. So I do remember that you said, you wish you'd set aside more money, but where do you feel like you were most surprised?
Shipping was such a, like, it took me by storm. I didn't realize how much shipping would cost. I think, yeah, like in Canada, the shipments, like shipping is more expensive in Canada. But if you're finding that to be expensive, if you're Canadian, you can check out Chit Chats. Or if you're in the US, you don't have to go with like a fancy, you can just use the US Postal Service. Like you don't have to go like the fancy route. It would just be like longer lead times.
Sure. And so to make sure I'm understanding, when you say shipping, you mean actually getting the product from your hands to the customers, or is it actually getting the products to you?
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then as far as managing the inventory, did you set up a SKU identifier, or and then is there a software that you use for inventory?
Yes. So in terms of inventory, I used what was native on Shopify. And in terms of SKUs, I had like a code that made sense for me. So, everyone's going to have something different. So what I did was I did the first 2 letters of the product, the season, and the color variant. So let's say it was just like lip gloss. It would be like LI lip gloss, fall, winter. And then it would be like dash red or whatever. I had like funny names for them. Like one was named after like a streetcar in Toronto. So it was like 502, whatever, just something. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you.
Right.
Because you're the one that's just going to look at it, and it's going to help keep you organized in terms of how you pack your orders and how much inventory you have on hand. So creating a system that just works for you and only you is like, it's important to start with that, because as you expand your product line, you're going to get yourself really confused if you don't have a system. So even if you're, starting with a couple of products, investing in that system is you'll be thinking of your future. And so that's, yeah.
And so we are going to wrap up, but one question that we like to ask is if there's one thing that you want people on today's call to take away, what would it be?
I think that all the kind of like the logistics aside, the most important part is really being passionate about what you're doing, because we have all the knowledge in the world on the internet. We have all the resources. The most important part is your motivation and your kind of willingness and your drive, and that comes from within. So I think really choosing a niche and choosing something you're really passionate about is going to be your best step forward towards success as a first step.
That is so important. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. We are grateful for you for sharing your expertise with our community.